Today on the LA Food Podcast, it's the most wonderful time of the year, dear listener, and I'm talking, of course, about the advent of the LA Times 101 Best Restaurants list. Bill Addison and Jenn Harris dropped their picks at a highfalutin soiree earlier this week, and the reaction, as always, consists of everything from love to loathing. But what does it actually mean for Kato to earn the number one spot 2 years in a row, for restaurants like Bestia and Pijja Palace to fall off of the list, and for new hotspots like Stella and Budonoki to be snubbed entirely? As you know, these are the kinds of questions that eat Father Sal and I alive, so we decided to approach this year's list with a frankly deranged level of in-depth analysis, the likes of which might cause Bill and Jenn to take out a restraining order on yours truly, and you know what? I wouldn't blame them. So buckle up, dear listener, because we've combed through every 101 list since 2013 to determine what exactly this year's list says about our city, its restaurants, and the people who write about them. As always, consider leaving us a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm your host, Lucas Servodio, and without further ado, let's chow down. The LA Food Podcast is presented by The Lonely Oyster. Unwind at The Lonely Oyster's Echo Park Night Watch. Did you know that every night is industry night at The Lonely Oyster, dear listener? Stroll in after 10 p.m. nightly for a one-of-a-kind experience designed for the night owls and hospitality pros. Indulge in $12 handshake cocktails, expertly crafted liquid chef concoctions, delicious late-night hot bites, and chef's choice dozen oysters. More than just a place to unwind, The Lonely Oyster warmly welcomes industry professionals, providing a space where like-minded individuals can connect, relax, and enjoy the camaraderie that comes with the late-night scene. Whether you're looking to kick back after a long shift or simply enjoy the vibrant atmosphere, late night at The Lonely Oyster is the perfect rendezvous for those who appreciate good company and great food and drinks. Don't miss this nightly affair and let the good times roll at The Lonely Oyster. Welcoming back to the LA Food Podcast, a man who has the same Spotify Wrapped as pretty much the entire state of Iowa. Father Sal, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I don't know what this comparison to Iowa is. I just listen to sports and like movie and TV podcasts. How cultured is Iowa? Like, do we know? Are they listening to the big picture like that? I feel like no.
I think they're cultured enough to watch a ton of football and a ton of television, and that is what your Spotify Wrapped tells me that you are doing.
Dude, it said I was in the top 0.5% of listeners to sports podcasts. That's pretty brutal.
I think people even who work in sports probably don't fall into that category.
Yeah, and by the way, yet again, the LA Countdown does not make my top 5 most listened to pods. My bad, bro. I'm not doing the work.
The LA Food Podcast, you mean? He doesn't even know the name of our fucking podcast.
Wait, what did I say? What did I say?
You said the LA Countdown, my friend.
I mean, whatever. It's the same thing.
All right. Yeah, not a big supporter of the pod. He can't even listen back to it. I will say I did the work. The LA Food Podcast was my number 2 podcast because you got to listen to yourself. In order to improve, you've got to be able to identify what's going well and what's not going so well.
Yeah, like watching the tape. Speaking of sports, yeah, going back to it. I will say I do listen exclusively to myself, basically. It's the only thing I listen to is my own voice for that exact reason, right? Just to like, self-critique, and also just because I'm feeling myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, these takes are fire.
Well, we didn't mean to start this podcast on such a masturbatory note because, dear listener, this week is, I think, the most wonderful week of the year, and that is the week that the LA Times drops its 101 Best Restaurants list. It is, in my mind, one of the seminal moments, if not the seminal moment, on the culinary calendar of Los Angeles that happens on an annual basis. And needless to say, it was a doozy. Saul, how excited are you to discuss this today?
I'm excited. We'll dive into it. I'm curious to hear why you think it's a doozy. I do have my own thoughts as well, which I suppose are a bit in that direction. But like, I gotta say, man, lists. Remember when we used to talk about James Beard and we were like, awards are fake?
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting to our lists fake. Our list's pretty fake. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm listed out this year a little.
Well, look, I said it's a doozy because I think every time a list like this drops, it's a doozy. It engenders a lot of conversation, right? And I think what you're going to hear out there are two types of takes. You're going to hear people who gush over how amazing Los Angeles is, kind of like, honestly, the intro to the list, which is talking about, how it's the family picture of such a beautiful food city, right? And then you're going to get people who are really pissed off at the list, right? You're going to get people who are criticizing it, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly. People who, like to go after Bill Addison specifically for not doing a good enough job, or a job that is deemed to be as good as Jonathan Gold did back in the day. And you're also going to get people who are really pissed off that certain restaurants didn't make it right. Because I wanted to avoid some of that list fatigue and some of that fatigue of typical takes, I wanted to do things in a different way today. I wanted to do it in a way where we're providing real analysis. So, Saul, I spent the better part of this week compiling what I can only describe as an unhinged spreadsheet containing every single list since Jonathan Gold started in 2013. Father Sal, are you worried about my mental health?
A little bit, yeah. Every single 101. You capped, like, it's an impressive piece of work. I love that I told you, like, on Tuesday, or no, last week or something, right? I was like, bro, I got you. I'll help out. And then I was like, no, I don't want to. I don't think I'm going to do that.
Yeah, I think your exact words was, you'll have the data tonight. I did not have the data that night.
Yeah. I got work, man. I got things to do, real things. But the cool part of the project, and we had discussed maybe doing this, I think, on the pod, like last episode, just to give full context, right? Trends over time for where the restaurants sit, how much turnover there is, just to help contextualize year over year, which I think has been missing, or like really something I've wanted for a long time, because we talk about these same awards and lists year over year. I feel like we should do this for James Beard, for eaters, like just get a sense of how things are changing over time, and whether there's some consistency in what we're being told is the best food in the city.
Yeah, dude, I think you're absolutely right. Like, if you're looking at just the list in one given year, like, you're flying blind, basically, because I think the most useful way to take these lists, and I think Bill Addison may have even said this last year, right? It's a snapshot. It's taking the temperature, right, of where the city is in a given year. However, it's really hard to like evaluate that snapshot if you don't have the previous snapshots in front of you. And when you're looking at like side by side, like Jonathan Gold's lists versus the lists that were done by, Bill Addison and Patricia Escarcega, or the lists in recent years that were just by Bill Addison, and obviously this year, which is not just by Bill Addison, but is also by Jenn Harris for the first time, then you really start to see like how the city has been evolving. And that's where I think these lists are the most valuable.
Yeah, well, I'll say that's how it's most valuable for freaks like us. If you're just like an LA Times subscriber, the 101 is a real, or just someone who's visiting LA, the 101 is, of course, a useful guide every given year, just because it gives you a sense of some of the top restaurants in the city. That's its fundamental purpose.
Right.
But for us, where we talk about this every week, it's much more fun to not just be like, oh, here's a snapshot this year and this year without any historical context, because I think it tells a more interesting story to go back and look at how things have evolved. And also, I think tells us a bit about how our, critics of record approach the work.
Absolutely. And we're going to get to that, because I think actually people play a really big part in how the lists actually come out. And when I say that, it doesn't sound surprising, but based on how people talk about it, it definitely feels like it's going to catch a lot of people by surprise, because I think a lot of people approach these lists as like Bible. They're like, oh, I can't believe that the LA Times has enshrined these restaurants as the best restaurants in the city. And it's like, no, you've really got to look at who's compiling the list, and that is reflected in the lists that are selected in some way, shape, or form. Now, before we get into the list itself, I want to talk a little bit about methodology, which I know is an obsession of yours. It's something we talk about with all of the lists and the guides and the awards that we discuss on this podcast. We didn't get very much from the LA Times on this. Here's what we got in the upfront. Bill writes that we, being Bill Addison and Jenn Harris, crisscrossed the region for months, checking in on stalwarts and swapping notes on potentially overlooked contenders. We agreed a lot and debated plenty, especially about pizza. We asked ourselves over and over, which mix of restaurants tells the most compelling, complete, and delicious story about Los Angeles? Are you satisfied with this methodology?
I mean, I think in a sense it is what it is. What I find interesting about the methodology is, and just the way we're talking about this in general, there's two realities with the 101. It's a snapshot of 101 restaurants that like capture the city in a moment in time and present some of the best food that's happening. But it's also a ranking.
Mm-hmm.
And the ranking is where stuff gets weird and where like, and that's what's entirely not addressed by this, right? And and it's what confuses me too, because I think it really does, it could dictate the amount of business a place is getting one year over the other, whether or not they're 10 or 50. And that's where it gets weird for me, like with this, because it's fake. It's fake. There's no objective ranking, right? You're just like, and there's no way to compare some of these restaurants.
Yeah.
Like between Melise and Sonora Town, there's no criteria to put them side by side. So I'm fine with, obviously, Jen and Bill know the city like the back of their hand. And I generally think the list captures a decent set of what LA has to offer.
Yeah.
The rankings is where it's like that's the clickbait. That's like just like the rage bait of this. And I'm entirely unclear how it's determined.
Total. And I think the ranking, to your point, is also what invites people to really read into it a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said something really interesting, that it really does, I think, maybe not determine, but certainly influence a restaurant's outcome and business, right? And we're going to get into this, but I think that there are certain restaurants that trend up over time, certain restaurants that trend down over time. And, whether the LA Times means to do this or not, that does sort of like influence how people think about whether a restaurant star is rising or waning, right? And so I think an additional level of methodology would be helpful to help us understand that and give some credence or some context, at least, for people in terms of what these rankings actually mean.
The rankings in particular, it doesn't even necessarily have to be methodology, because there isn't, I mean, you could of course come up with some criteria, Bill and Jen could, and decide, how say these are the areas by which we gauge restaurants, and that informs the ranking. Right. But like, even then it's basically, it's all subjective. Right. And when you're choosing a place to go 10 versus 50, especially with some of the variants we see, I'm trying to like, does that mean like the place is super inconsistent, or like there's what didn't you like about it as much this year necessarily?
Yeah. What
informed this, that back and forth? And we'll get into the actual numbers in a second, but that was kind of like not bugging me, but just like it's so arbitrary at times, it seems. And could, I assume does, have quite a bit of actual economic impact for these folks.
Absolutely. Now, before we dive into the 101, it's not the only list that the LA Times dropped. Of course, just a couple years ago, I think they started releasing a Hall of Fame in parallel with the 101. 5 new honorees were inducted to the Hall of Fame this year: AOC, Mariscos Jalisco, Taste of Tehran, Soban, and Harold and Bell's. First and foremost, congratulations to these restaurants, obviously. But as some of our listeners know, but as many don't, because as we just learned on our Spotify Wrapped, we have a lot of new listeners this year. I have a bit of a problem with the Hall of Fame. Do you remember this, Saul?
Yeah, I do. It's like your stupidest take. it's your worst take.
So I think I have amended my take in order to make it less stupid. And just to remind our listeners, my take was basically that the Hall of Fame is a cop-out because it robs these restaurants like Mariscos Jalisco or Jitlada, who are still in many ways at the top of their game. It robs them from the opportunity to still compete with the other restaurants on the 101 for a high ranking, right? And I think in some ways that is more valuable than actually the Hall of Fame status. I think a lot of people use the 101 guide. I'm not actually sure how many people use the Hall of Fame. I also think that like the 101 has a long-standing cachet, right? It's been going on for 12 years. Jonathan Gold took it over in 2013, and then it's been continuing ever since. So I think the Hall of Fame, I'm sort of like up in the air about its value, right? But I think, Father Sal, I have a solution to this problem. Would you like to hear it?
Better SEO? what?
No. Here's and the reason I even thought about this is because I was thinking back to my conversation with Wolfgang Puck, right? And thinking about how much he actually cares about the restaurant and the restaurant being perceived, his restaurant, Spago specifically, being perceived still at the top of its game, because he still every day pours his heart into it. And it struck me as I was looking at the lists from the past, especially the Jonathan Gold lists, that up until his final list in 2017, Jonathan Gold had Spago hovering in the top 5. On his final list, I believe that Spago was number 3, if I'm not mistaken, which is insanely high. That's like Hayato Baru level like rankings for Spago, right? Now, I think if you gave Wolfgang Puck the choice of whether he wants to be in the Hall of Fame or if he wants to still compete in the 101, he is going to say, I want to be in the fucking 101. And so to me, I think the LA Times should leave it up to the restaurants as to whether they want to be in for 101 consideration or Hall of Fame consideration. I think there should be like an application where like a restaurant, if they think, hey, we want to be in the Hall of Fame, we think we've earned it, they submit an application. But until they do that, they're still in contention for the 101. It's almost like, I don't want to say the Hall of Fame is like retirement, right? But it kind of is. You know what I mean?
I'm shocked to say this, but you make good points. At the core of this is the fact, to your point, that people know to look for the 101 and not necessarily the Hall of Fame. Like, you wouldn't even, like, if you type in best restaurants in city, you're going to get a list of the hottest or best of the year then, right? Even the term, like the terminology Hall of Fame is I think not all that native to food.
It's a sports thing.
Yeah, of course. So,
and I'm sorry to interrupt, but in the Hall of Fame in sports, what do all those players have in common?
Of course, they're retired. I got it.
Or dead. Or dead.
Usually they retire before they die. But yeah, so there's two sides, right? The reason why I like the Hall of Fame is because I like it as a historical document, just like what we're talking about with these snapshots and comparing it over time, the 101 over time. The reason we want to do that is because we want like to better understand our city and the context with which each list comes. The Hall of Fame provides that context and the history of the city in a way that I think is valuable. At the same time, I totally get your point, right? Like that when a restaurant, quote unquote, retires to the Hall of Fame, people may not know to go looking for it in the same way. And therefore it doesn't maybe get the same shine. At the same time, I'm also happy that I don't know how many restaurants are in the Hall of Fame now. Is it 20, 30 maybe? Like,
I think around 30.
Yeah. Those are potentially 30 spots that go to new places in the 101.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think every Hall of Fame restaurant is like a 101 level thing, but let's say 15 to 20. That's still significant, right? Like to like have that space in the 101 to bring new faces and voices in, right? So I think it's valuable from that regard. It's more like at its core, I suppose it's like a branding / like familiarity exercise that, and you're not wrong. People, I don't think, do go looking for the Hall of Fame in the same way they do the 101.
One of the examples that I think really suffers from the 101, I don't know about suffers, maybe that's too extreme a word, right? But another thing that struck me from the spreadsheet is that like there aren't many restaurants at all that have been on every single list. In fact, I think there was only one restaurant that if it had been included this year would have been on every single list, and that is Mariscos Jalisco. Since 2013, I should say. What happened this year? They were inducted to the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, I don't know. If you gave Raul the choice, which would he rather? I don't know. So I'll leave it at that, but I think that you would agree that this is a much better reason point than last year's.
Yeah. I see the point. I still like the Hall of Fame, again, as a document, but maybe there's some comms campaign or something that the LA Times can run to get people more familiar with it. Again, I don't know. Maybe people do use it more than we think. I just know for sure I don't. And it seems like its uptake more broadly is probably less likely. Also, because you're exactly right. Actually, if you're a tourist visiting LA, do you want to go to like the Hall of Fame restaurant, which makes it seem kind of old and out of date, to your very point?
Yeah.
Or do you want to go to the number one restaurant of the year? Right.
I want to go to the number one personally. And yes, I am a basic bitch. And that was reinforced by the fact that my number one song on my Spotify Wrapped was none other than Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso.
Oh my God.
But I'll own that, you know, I'll lean in. Okay, look, let's dive into the 101, okay? We're going to talk about the top 10 first. We're not going to bury the lead. Kato was number one, continuing its dominance. It was its third number one, second in a row, and seventh overall time on the list. My question for you, Saul, are they the Manchester City, aka the dominant force of LA restaurants right now?
I guess so. I need to have Kato. Like that's my main response. Like we have to go. Let's make a bet. Figure like have one of us pay and we'll go.
Or let's just fucking go.
No. It needs to be stakes. So one of us needs to be humiliated when we're there and pay the financial costs. I mean, look, it's great, good for Kato. why like what is it about Kato that makes it the number one so much? I mean, they have the description of course there, but like in the list itself. But my response is it like, oh, okay, it's really that much more. It's really the number one basically every year like that.
My question about is it the dominant force is like, okay, it's 2 years in a row now. I think Hayato was number one in 2022, right? But like, I'm wondering now if like Kato has overtaken it and is now so far ahead that it's going to be hard for a restaurant like Hayato or another restaurant to catch up. Really hard to say without the context that you're asking for, right? One thing that you can look at is what other accolades has this restaurant received? And I think Kato, it was the one Los Angeles restaurant to be mentioned in the world's 50 best, not on the world's 50 best, but as one of the, I forget what they call it, like rising restaurant of the year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the fact that it's being recognized not just by the Los Angeles Times, but by, broader sources, I think bolsters its case. Other thing about the top 10 that strikes me, though, is the changeover from year to year is relatively low. So the changes in the top 10 seem to matter, right? Like it seems to be an intentional thing. Which restaurants are being included in the top 10? It seems to be a clear marker from whoever is compiling the list that these restaurants are saying something special. And the ones that fall out, they're not saying something as special as maybe the other restaurants in the top 10 are right now. So let's talk about the new entries into the top 10 this year. Number 1, Baru. Baru is the obviously LA Times Restaurant of the Year, had a meteoric rise. It was 33 last year, 33rd, and is this year number 3. Secondly, Barbacoa Ramirez entered the chat for the first time, listed at number 8, and Dunsmore made it into the top 10, up from number 55. Okay, of course that means restaurants had to fall out, and the ones that paid the price, so to speak, are Moosecraft, which dropped from number 10 to number 14. This is where I feel like Steve Kornacki. Anajac, which fell out of the top 10 for the first time since Bill Addison's tenure. It dropped to 11. And after 2 second places in a row, by the way. And notably, Bavel dropped from number 10 to number 39, okay? So when you hear about the musical chairs in the top 10, what strikes you about it?
I mean, there's no issue with turnover in the top 10 like that, right? Like you want to see new and fresh faces brought in. Generally, I mean, even though Kato and Hayato are always near the top, I want to see other folks represented. To me, I wonder what goes so wrong for like a Bisbell to drop from 10 to 39. Right? Like what is it about?
That's huge. That is such a seismic drop. It dropped, to your point, it drops below its sister restaurant, Safi's.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and by the way, Bestia, I'm actually I will say I'm more curious about the restaurants that drop out of the list entirely, more so than the ones that drop out of the top 10. It's fine. Like, okay, like whatever. There's a little bit of turnover. For the most part, it seems consistent because Anajac, 2 to 11 seems like a big drop. They're still in the top like 10 of the city, essentially, right? It's more that why do certain restaurants like Babel get seemingly punished more so than others? I have no idea. I feel like I'm doing too much like shrugging on this, but because it's so subjective, because it's like what's meaningful is that all these restaurants are here, and that's why I think it is more significant when restaurants drop out of the 101 entirely.
Yeah,
that to me is like a meaningful shift and decision. The rankings are just like who knows?
Yeah, but I think there are things we can surmise at least, right? So one thing is like Bavel, right? You mentioned drops to number 33. It's now below its sister restaurant, Safi's, at 22. One sort of like quote unquote conspiracy theory I have, right? It's not really a conspiracy theory, more sort of like an educated guess, is that the people who are compiling these lists are people who dine out all the time. They really have their finger on the pulse of not just the restaurants in the city, but also like the personnel within those restaurants at the city. And at a restaurant group where like, Ori Minash, right, of Bavel, Bestia, and Safi's, where he is split between 3 restaurants, I think they have their finger on the pulse of where Ori is spending the most resources and time. And my theory is that in this day and age, in 2024, Ori is spending the most time at Safi's. And therefore, they think, okay, Safi's is sort of his flagship restaurant right now in terms of where he's dedicating the most attention. And I think that may influence how they sort of rank those things. The same could be said of like the Evan Funky properties, right? Shout out to the LA Times for only including one Evan Funky property, which they included Funky. They had the courage, I should say, to exclude Mother Wolf and Felix. And I think that they may have done that because, as we've heard from other sources, that's where Evan Funky is spending the most time. And I think that that is a totally valid reason to do that. So even though we can't definitively know, that's my theory as to why something like the Bavel thing happens.
Sure. And you'd presume if that's where the head chef is or the face of the restaurant, that's also where they're performing the best, right? I don't know if it's just as simple as like, oh, we know he's there, so we'll rank it higher. I would presume if that's where they're spending their time, that's also where they're executing at the highest level. Also hilarious that you're like, it's not a conspiracy, it's an educated guess, which is what I'm pretty sure every conspiracy theorist thinks about their conspiracies.
Okay, but there is a spectrum of conspiracies, right? There's like full tinfoil hat, pandas aren't real, they're just people in panda suits, to like educated guess, maybe we landed on the moon, maybe we didn't, right? No, I'm just kidding. And then the other one I wanted to point out, and this is a different question, Barbacoa Ramirez, right? Number 8. This is its first time on the list, but it's not a new restaurant. It's been around since 2021, which, hilariously, Bill Esparza was really quick to point out on his stories, saying that he discovered the place in 2020. Classic Bill. Just gotta love Bill, right? That to me is a question too. Like, why does a restaurant that has been operating for a few years suddenly make it on?
I don't know. I mean, look, it's. I mean, maybe Jenn Harris makes Barbacoa Ramirez quite a lot, right? And now that she's participating in the list, it gets that shine. I would assume. I mean, with the co-authorship, that could explain some of the bigger decisions. Yeah, maybe Jenn has a more critical take of development. I mean, I don't know this for sure, but if we're just looking at changes year over year and then what might explain them, that could be one reason. And that's totally, again, that's fine, right? That's just someone bringing their perspective to bear on the list. But that's the only reason I can think of, again, because we know so little about how this works.
I think the other reason, though, is like, the people crafting these lists are humans, and they can only eat at so many restaurants in a given year. I think it's entirely possible that even Bill Addison, whether it was Bill Addison or Jenn Harris's pick, just hadn't gotten around to Barbacoa Ramirez yet, Maybe it took him 2 years to get to Barbacoa Ramirez because there was so much other shit going on. I don't think it's like necessarily a sinister reason. It could just be logistical. Anyways, enough about the top 10. I wanted to talk a little bit about the rest of the list. And the nice thing about the spreadsheet is it allows us to look at how restaurants trend over time, as I mentioned. And when I took a look at the list since 2013, it strikes me that we can sort of characterize restaurants into a few different categories. The categories I sort of determined are A, rising stars, ones that over time continue to rise to the point where some of them are now like locks for the top 10. 2, wilting flowers, ones that could, can you tell that I asked ChatGPT to help me come up with these titles?
Oh, Jesus Christ, dude.
But wilting flowers, right? I didn't want to call them like, sinking ships because I don't think it necessarily means that they're going to fail as restaurants, right? It's just restaurants that are consistently sliding down the rankings for whatever reason. 3, the well-oiled machines, the ones that like almost year to year stay in the exact same spot of the list, like the same like general portion of the list. 4, the yo-yos, ones that are always on the list, but for some reason, some years they're super high, some reasons they're super low, and then they go back up again, or vice versa. Let's start with the rising stars. This year, looking back a few years, there's a few notable rising stars. 1, Holy Basil, which was at 33 this year, up from 96 in 2022. Bar Ma, which feels a little bit weird to call it a rising star because it's been around for 10 plus years, but it's a restaurant that continues to go up in the rankings. It's at 37, up from 76 in 2022. Mini Kebab is at 42, up from 61 in 2022. Pizzeria Say and Antico Nuovo, which is number 12 this year, up from 41 in 2022. So of those rising stars, do you think any have the potential to make a Baru-like jump into the top 10?
Of these, I think Pizzeria Say and Antico Nuovo would be my guesses. You'll note that the top 10 is usually like, it's either like super high level, like finer dining and like pushing the envelope, or like a hip, under like kind of closer to a Barbacoa Ramirez, where it's like, or like street food.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a kind of no in between for like what I would say a Holy Basil or a Bar Ma, right? Like I would not expect those to make it. I guess other ones could jump in.
Anajac?
Yeah, Anajac's interesting because I mean, it's innovative and great. I mean, that Anajoc is a little bit like maybe the exception, except I think what Justin did there, kind of innovating the menu, Thai Taco Tuesdays and all that, I think is what kind of pushed it into that like high level sort of arena. So those would be my guesses. It's weird, even as we've gone back and done the list, restaurants are like, to continue the sports thing, like when you're watching a sports team over time, you can like see young players grow into stars, right? And like
Yeah.
team chemistry build, and you're like, okay, I can like project some sort of like trajectory here based on like what I'm seeing over time due to the consistency of the staff and the fact that you have like measurable results each year, all that. For these, it's like restaurants are not the same. So it's hard to necessarily say project out one way or the other. Any of these could end up being yo-yos in like a year or two.
It's interesting you say that. I actually think there are factors you could look at which indicate whether a restaurant is going to go up or not. And I think that's where it shares some similarities with sports. One thing I would look at is, what is the restaurant's like business plan? Is the business plan to expand into more locations, or is it to continue building on the success of that restaurant, maybe opening a sister restaurant a la Safi's to Bavel, right? But not necessarily becoming a franchise, right? I think if you start to become a bit of a franchise, that's when I think you start to trend downwards on the list. And I think we've seen that with certain places on lists, that as they get more locations, they grow bigger. Pizzana, for example, was on the list consistently for like 5 years there. When it started to become a bit more franchise, I think maybe quality was perceived as dipping a little bit. That's when it started to fall off the list. Of these rising stars, I would worry for Holy Basil and Mini Kebab, which in my, like, from their business, like, sort of trajectory, I think are leaning towards opening more locations in different places of the same thing and sort of becoming mini chains. And I don't think that actually helps you get into the top 10. So that's one type of factor, right? But then for other restaurants, right, like Pizzeria Say, I think you can kind of look at the kinds of things that the chef is attempting and sort of see that as like a sign of the growth that they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with Pizzeria Say, Chef William over there is experimenting with things like pizza omakase, right? I think it's only a matter of time before he sort of starts expanding the menu into things that are far beyond pizza. I'm trying to, there's other examples of this, like Taco Maria, right? Like it was much more than a taqueria, right? It was like not even a taqueria at the end of the day, right? I think I could see Pizzeria Say eventually becoming something similar, where it started off as a pizzeria and it'll probably retain the name Pizzeria Say, but it becomes something much more than that. And based on those factors, I think the ones to make it into the top 10 could be a Pizzeria Say. Antico Nuovo, I think maybe at a ceiling there and sort of like hovering around the top 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's how I think about these rising stars. Another conspiracy.
I don't think that's a conspiracy at all. It's why I named Say as one of the two I think could make it up. I think you're exactly right. It's I think the list wants to reward at the top 10 either the consistently highest quality, but also most interesting, like and compelling food that's pushing the envelope, which is partly why I think you saw Baru rise as rapidly as you did. And so I think that's possibly exactly right.
Wow, that is like the highest praise. I've received some high praise from you this pod. One saying that like my take on the Hall of Fame wasn't completely shit. You saying that that's possibly right on this one. I don't even know what to do with all these compliments.
Look, sometimes you have a good opinion. What can we do?
All right, moving on to the next category, aka the wilting flowers. These are restaurants that have been trending down for a while. Number one is Found Oyster. It's at 74 this year, down from 38 in 2022. Damian is at 65 this year, down from 35 in 2022. Pancho's Tlayudas has been trending down. Casilla has been trending down. Heritage Barbecue has been trending down. Pizzeria Bianco has actually gone down from 17 in 2022 to 69 this year. And Post and Beam is also at 84, down from 60 in 2022. Saul, are you worried about any of these slipping off the list entirely?
For the most part, no. I think these are going to be like 90% of these restaurants are going to be there forever. Post and Beam, I have not been to, but notably this. So I think part of this is like for the decisions they're making throughout is sort of attention, like social energy, buzz, and momentum, and brand name, frankly, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Bianco's ever dropping off this list. I don't think Found Oyster even is going to drop off. Ponchos, I think, is safe as well. Something that seems like quieter, or like it's maybe, just like maybe not quite as compelling in like in the zeitgeist of the city, which again, the list is supposed to snapshot like where people are eating and going, and like maybe the places people are talking about as well as part of the criteria here. And so for the most part, no, I think these are going to be fine. That being said, and I think actually what I just said is borne out by the ones that fell off the list a little bit.
I actually am worried about a couple of these for a similar reason that I said before in terms of like their business model and their potential future. Like Heritage Barbecue, for example, I think is leaning into more and more locations, sort of like Bloodsoes, right? And Bloodsoes used to have a perennial spot on this list, is no longer on the list and hasn't been on the list for a while. I could see Heritage Barbecue going the same way. Casilla as well, Chef Bryant there, I'm pretty sure is opening a new restaurant, and I could see his focus shifting away from that. So I think Casilla is one that may be saved by the Hall of Fame. They've been on for like 10 plus years, and they've been operating at a high level. So I could see it transitioning to the Hall of Fame at some point. So yeah, those are the ones that I would sort of be quote unquote concerned about.
Really quick though, I don't think it's quite as simple as you open more restaurants and therefore you get punished. I do think, for example, I went back to Bloodsoes in August, and it was actually a worse experience than what it used to be back in 2015 when I was here. Like the serving size had changed, the menu had changed a little bit. Like it wasn't the same experience. And I don't know if that's because they've opened more locations and have maybe franchised more. That trade-off between quantity and quality could be some of it here, or whatever the decisions are behind the menu. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case, though. Like, I mean, I think restaurateurs. The only other consideration there being, if you're a restaurateur with multiple spots open, like Ori or Funky, like maybe there's a desire to diversify a little bit the representation on the list, so that could bite you, or at least limit you to one or two spots representing your whatever business is. But I don't think there's actually like you open more spots, therefore you go down relationship.
Yeah, I think it has to do with exactly what you said, which is that it's sort of like a tried and true experience that restaurateurs talk about, that as you open more locations or something, quality is really hard to maintain. So that is exactly what it has to do with, right? It happens all the time that restaurants like expand and quality suffers. And I think that's why it happens. And I think if we did look like, and luckily we have the spreadsheet, so maybe we could do like look into this and like follow up on it in a future episode, right? But like, I think if we looked at the restaurants that did expand, I think we'd see a constant trend of them falling off the list. And I think that has to do with how difficult it is to maintain quality. I think also, you bring up the point of social conversation and buzz. I mean, it's just true that like when something becomes a chain, like people look down on it, especially like foodies, right? And so, I think it damages your buzz points too.
There's chain, but there's also like the new favorite child, right? Evan Funky opening his new restaurant, maybe spending more time there. Suddenly that's like the favorite child instead of a Mother Wolf, which one thing I'll say is, based on Mother Wolf and Felix, Funky's food basically tastes the same.
Yeah.
No matter where you're, like, it's like the same essential vibe each time. Like, so if Funky, the restaurant, is on, I would say Felix and Mother Wolf are probably just as likely to be deserving, but it's the favorite child, right? And between, like that attention buzz, possibly the quality, if Evan's spending more of his time there, and also possibly like the desire to distribute, or include other places that are not just run by the same person over and over.
Which I think is a key factor here. I do think that there's an element of wanting to diversify the lists, which I think is good. I think it's good to like give like spread the shine. I really liked it, for example, when Jonathan Gold would sort of like condense all of the Mozza restaurants into Mozzaplex, right? Instead of like going Osteria Mozza and Pizzeria Mozza and Kiespaka on all of the lists, right? That is a valuable practice. Moving on to the well-oiled machines. These are restaurants that like every year, they're sort of in the same neck of the woods on the list, or at least have been for a few years. Alta Adams falls in that bracket, always between the mid-30s and 40s. Kiespaka has been between 23 and 26 since 2022. Safi's has been between 19 and 25. Tsubaki between 11 and 21. Melise between 20 and 24. Orsa and Winston between 15 and 17 since 2022. And they called it, by the way, LA's most accessible fine dining experience, which I thought was a cool nod. And then obviously, as we mentioned, the top 1 through 5, 1 through 10 changes very little year to year. This seems to be one of the most common classifications of the lists. If you went restaurant by restaurant and you had to give each one a tag of, are they wilting flowers? Are they rising stars? Are they yo-yos? I think you'd find that most of them are well-oiled machines, right? Like most of the repeats are sort of in the same neck of the woods on the list. Some might say this is lazy on the writer's part, right? But others might say this is actually because there is some sort of consistency to the methodology, and those restaurants are like sort of benchmarks that the writers use to like measure other restaurants against based on their consistency. Do you see any value in either argument?
The benchmarking idea is an interesting one, right? I could see that being something to lean on. Well, my actually main question for you is, why did you only go back 2 years for this data? Kind of across, like 2 years, I don't know, is that a big enough sample size to really like name these one way or the other?
The reason is because the pandemic kind of fucked everything up. Huge wrench, right? Sure. 2020 and 2021, they didn't do a ranking. And also there was like 2020 was a real sort of outlier in a number of ways. But that's the reason I only went back a couple of years. I think also, but that said though, you know, even if you looked at the last year where it was ranked, the trend would sort of remain true of like the restaurant's trajectory.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. I find it interesting to think that there's a couple of restaurants that maybe the critic knows very well, right? And feels like, is that consistency? And then basically says, I know this is going to be about here.
Yeah.
And the way I decide whether something's below or above it is comparing it to this spot, right? That makes sense to me.
Like Orsa and Winston, right? Like that, the fact that that's always kind of like number 15, like I could totally see that being like how Bill Addison is like, is it better than Orsa and Winston? Then it gets to be in the top 10. Is it worse than Orsa and Winston? Then it's, you know, under the top 15, right? Like I could totally see that being one way they do it. But again, total conspiracy theory. Final category, the yo-yos, okay? These are restaurants that for no rhyme or reason go up and down, right? Pine and Crane is one of these. Yongbon is one of these. Yang's Kitchen is one of these. And Villa's, I think, is shaping up to be a bit of this. It was at 58 in 2022, went up slightly in 2023, and now is down to 76 this year. How do you explain yo-yoing?
I don't know.
For social media, I'm just going to make a supercut of every time you said, I don't know on this podcast.
I don't know. But no, my theory on this is actually, again, I would suspect this is much less about the quality of the restaurant. It's much more about how interesting they are that year. Yeah. Relative to the field. I think that's what's actually, I mean, as a whole, I think as we're going along, I think that's what the ranking is really doing. I mean, better or worse, quote unquote, right? Like this way, like a place is better or worse than Orsa and Winston. I just don't think that's what's happening here. Or maybe, I mean, of course, a little bit, but it's too difficult to compare the range of spots here. I think it's what they're really saying is here are maybe the most interesting restaurants that are in the landscape right now, and for whatever reason, maybe either menu changes or literally, yeah, like I said, buzz and excitement around the place. I think that maybe informs it better. Like Pine and Crane is Pine and Crane. Like it's been Pine and Crane forever. Just get like 64 to 44 back to 67. I don't know if that's what that really, if that's really saying anything about the restaurant's quality. It's just kind of like, hey, this is like how interesting it is this year.
Yeah. That's one where it maybe is like, and maybe we could say that about all of these, is like,
yeah.
That's where it fits into the landscape this year. One year, it happens to be really an interesting restaurant. This year, it happens to not be as interesting, and therefore, and that's just in relation to the other interesting restaurants that have popped up on the scene. So,
I mean, it's so obvious. I think it's pretty straightforward. But more, let's talk about the ones that fall off. I think that's like a really that is the more meaningful decision here. I think more so than any yo-yoing or whatever. I think you put too much time into these categories, man. This is like this is not like as interesting as what has been restaurants fall off, because like I said, like we've been saying, that I think takes off a really notable piece of attention.
All right. Okay, so it took us only 47 minutes, 48 minutes to get to the part that you wanted to talk about. Notable exclusions, okay? These come into two categories, which are ones that fell off and ones that weren't even included, but, I'm sure tons of people are going to be pissed about the fact that they weren't included. Notable ones that fell off this year, okay? Bestia had been on for a very long time, fell off this year, and it is not in the Hall of Fame. Felix and Mother Wolf, as we've alluded to, from Funky. Love to Eat fell off. It was included for the first time, actually, last year, and it fell off. Rosso Blue fell off, and Pijja Palace also fell off. I think others did as well, but these are ones that stuck out to me. What strikes you about this?
One, I will say Pijja Palace is kind of the odd one out here. I find it really interesting that Pijja's off the list now, because when we remember when Pijja was getting all its attention, we went and ate there. The Malai rigatoni was good. And everything else was like, all right. I think that was a place that was like Silver Lake, got super hot, got a ton of buzz, got the national attention. And then the food, then people like kind of came back down to reality with the food, which I think at the time we were like, good, but not like, maybe James Beard Award winner. So it's interesting that that's fallen off now. And again, reflects that, how much maybe buzz, or not just buzz, but like it was innovative, like right at the time.
Yeah.
Right. And they have not maybe built on that innovation. That's fine. The rest of these are interesting because they're institutions, right? They're such strong institutions. And I wonder if there's like hey, this place is good. like we don't need to give them the recognition again. Again, it sucks that they're in like this limbo between Hall of Fame, which I think Bestia could be. Felix and Mother Wolf, I don't think I've been around long enough for it yet. Love to Eat certainly could be. But it's almost like these are so solid that let's give some attention to others. Although the ones that were omitted were kind of shocking to me in a couple cases.
Yeah. I will say quickly on those notable exclusions from the ones that fell off, you mentioned it, but like there's a lot of Italian restaurants, Bestia, Felix, Mother Wolf, Rosso Blue, right? It could also have to do with the fact that there are a lot of other Italian restaurants on this list. And there's maybe a feeling of like, hey, we're Italianed out, let's just pick the best ones and leave the spots to other types of cuisine.
No, I think that's actually right. I kind of do think we've sort of reached peak Italian. I think Italian food is just kind of, for whatever reason, lost.
Be careful.
Momentum or interest. I'm saying it right to your face, baby. I think there is something to that. I think back in like 2015, when we got to the city, I think Italian food was really exciting, and there was like a lot of new voices and restaurants and ideas coming in around that cuisine. I think people are just kind of moving in a different direction right now, in terms of like, again, this is a snapshot of the city this year in terms of where I think are the quote unquote best and most interesting places to eat. I think it's kind of fair to say, like, look, you go to Antico Nuovo, you don't also have to go to Bestia.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's possible that's what they're saying.
Bro, I finally went to Antico Nuovo last night.
Oh, you did?
And let me tell you, you do not need to go to Bestia ever again. Because like that was one of the best meals I've had in Los Angeles, period, maybe. It was actually insane. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our server, Gail, who was absolutely lights out. I think we mentioned this on a previous pod, but we tried to go one night and we got smoked out of the restaurant because they lost power and they cook over an open flame there, and their ventilator, turns out, is extremely effective. So within minutes of losing power, the restaurant turns into a campfire, right? We were all evacuated, weren't able to eat. Finally went back last night, dude. Oh my God. And so, yeah, I think that there is like an element of just selecting the best, right? Cream of the crop, a lot of Italian to pick from. Let's just pick the best. Okay, let's talk about the ones that weren't included. Mostly new hotspots, okay? The ones that stuck out to me are Stella, which just opened in West Hollywood and everybody is head over heels for. Queen Street, which is in Eagle Rock from the Found Oyster people. Budonoki, which in Virgil Village has received a ton of buzz, right? It's received other massive awards, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Taqueria Frontera, which opened up in Cypress Park, and I believe it was LA Taco, named the #1 best taco in their Taco 69. RVR, Travis Lett's new restaurant in Venice. And then the Hummingbird in Echo Park, Ricardo Zarate's new restaurant, which is also very good. And then a couple of ones that just haven't been included ever, but other people might think, hey, that's one of LA's best restaurants. And those are restaurants like Girl and the Goat. There's Ototo. There's ones that have received a lot of buzz in recent years, like La Dolce Vita or Donna's in Echo Park. Any of these feel particularly controversial to you?
I mean, the Budonoki omission is kind of shocking, given how much energy. Like Budonoki, which I need to go and visit. I want is you liked it a lot. I remember you said it was one of your favorite meals you'd had in a while.
Oh, no.
It's a little bit is giving like Pijja Palace to me.
Oh, no, I knew you were going to say that.
It's a little bit. I'm just curious because like it has like the Instagram buzz. It has like famous food influencers doing pop-ups there. It is that kind of like, hey, you know, taking a classic Asian cuisine and putting twists on it, just like Pijja Palace did. And I think it's like a statement omission to not include Budonoki here. Yeah.
Statement omission. I kind of agree with you, but I think that if anything, Budonoki suffers from maybe being looped in with restaurants like Pijja Palace. I think maybe because restaurants like Pijja Palace have been so in the zeitgeist over the last few years, people look at Budonoki and even I think experience Budonoki and compare it to a place like Pijja Palace. And I think what ends up happening when you do that is you miss out on some of the nuance and the intention that is behind those dishes. I just don't think they're even in the same conversation. Sure, do they both have like fusion-y elements? Sure. Okay. So do a fuck ton of other restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. Another one that got omitted from the 101 is Amiga Amore in Highland Park, which is also, being lauded and praised left and right. And again, I think that also suffers from a bit of the Pijja Palaces when really it's just on a completely different level in terms of artisanship, execution, ideation. It's just like you can't even really compare the two, in my opinion. So I think it's guilty by association, but I don't think it deserves to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough. We'll go check it out and decide if it's worth the accolades and or omission here. But I just thought that was notable.
Yeah, I think that there's also some spots that are like, for example, one spot that I think could be on the 101 is Breadhead. It's a sandwich shop in Santa Monica, and I think you think of a sandwich shop and you're like, well, whatever, right? But like, I don't know, the lengths that they go to make their bread, which is, I think, one of the best focaccias in the city, the ingredients they source and stuff. Like, if we're talking about diversity of lists and trying to give a snapshot of what makes Los Angeles great right now, I think that there's room for more places like that. Like, and there are some, right? I noticed that, and I believe that this was a Jenn Harris doing. She added a sandwich shop down in Orange County, I want to say, towards the end of the list. It is called, thank God for my trusty spreadsheet, Mario's Butcher Shop. So I know that there's definitely like room for those kinds of places on the list. But I do think that, it could maybe stand to have a little bit more, but that's just personal preference. All right, buddy, we've made it to the end of this chat, but I'd like to share a couple overall lessons that, after spending way too much time with all of the lists since 2013, my sort of like, what is it called when you spend way too much time with something?
I don't know, like what, obsession or like
but like conspiracy theorists like living in their mom's basement. There's definitely like a neckbeard theory, like these kinds of things.
Yeah. It seems like what you've done with this list is that thing when you say the word too many times out loud and then it like starts like seeming not like a word. It seems like you've spent so much time looking at this that you're kind of like hallucinating.
I am that meme right now of like the galaxy brain, or the person with all of the like math equations in front of them. That's me right now. All right, overall lessons I'd like to share with you. Number one, this list is deeply influenced by who is making it. Like, that is so abundantly clear. Like, when you look at like Jonathan Gold's lists versus literally the moment that Bill Addison and Patricia Escarcega start to when Bill Addison starts alone, the shift and the overlap in those lists, those numbers like change dramatically. And I know you're like, that's obvious, right? But I think what you got to remember, there were certain places that Jonathan Gold kept including despite everybody probably being like, why the fuck is this guy still including this, right? Like Vincenti Restaurant is one that comes to mind. This like long time Brentwood restaurant that recently closed, actually. It was one of his favorites, and he always included it at like a ridiculously high spot on the list. What struck me is like, even though a lot of these critics, Jonathan, Bill Addison included, like are technically anonymous critics, they still have relationships, you know? They still have stakeholders. And I do think that there is an element for any sort of critic in sort of thinking about those to some degree. Even if it's not conscious, your subconscious, I think, does like influence your decisions. Don't treat this as like an empirical list. Remember that these are people that have their own sort of incentives and relationships and things that they're thinking about when they're producing this. Obvious take, but I think worth saying.
Like, so obvious. There's like being, a book really changes when the author's different. Yeah, like no shit, dude. Yeah. I mean, look, you kind of landed the plane by reminding people that this is not like, look, I think generally what we should be saying and like where we should go with our general list conversations as that like have like become like such a staple for us. We should be encouraging people to not rely on these. Like that's like what the message should be. To your point, it's not empirical. It's a useful, like, sure, it's an interesting reference. I get why you do it, but let's not limit ourselves to this, right? Let's time for a different conversation. But maybe where we end up going, maybe where I end up going with this is going anti-list culture, man, much more than we have.
Jeez.
Right? Because we've gone from like enjoying them, studying them, like questioning them, and now I'm like, I'm sick. I'm like, I'm not sick of it. I understand their role, their importance, but I just want to evolve how we talk about this because yeah, of course, it's not like, as we've said repeatedly, it's a subjective exercise. Whatever the human elements that you somehow figured out after 12 like sleepless hours or something. Yeah, it's true, but
no, I'm like literally loopy as fuck right now, dude. Okay, second point. Okay, this one's a little more controversial, or yeah, I think it's a good one. Okay, Jonathan Gold, the Barack Obama of LA food. Okay, here's what I mean by this. Okay, he was deeply zeitgeist shifting as a critic, right? In terms of introducing a new appreciation for under the radar restaurants, especially new types of cuisine and stuff like that. And I think we've definitely like lionized him as like this great sort of like advocate for that kind of thing in food journalism. Rightfully so. He was breaking the mold at his time. And that was sort of like the hope and change Obama, right? 2008, big change, big shift. However, when you look back at Obama's policies right now, they don't look so liberal. Some of them, right?
Okay, all right.
Like some of them having to do with immigration, some of them having to, like it took him forever to get to gay marriage, okay? Like what I'm saying is when you look back at Jonathan Gold's lists, if you compare them to Bill Addison and Jenn Harris's lists, I'm just saying like Bill Addison's, I think, have been way more revolutionary than Jonathan Gold in terms of like...
What?
Yeah. No, okay. Revolutionary is the wrong word. Because obviously like a revolution implies you are changing what came before you, right? What I mean is like they're actually like hyper progressive lists if we want to give them that label. Like what Bill Addison is including, he has really upped the game on Middle Eastern cuisine in a way that like Jonathan Gold never did. He's continued to like carry the torch for a lot of like, and Jenn Harris has been doing that this year as well. A lot of the, restaurants from East Asia, Southeast Asia, and their representation, Mexican restaurants as well. I think to what the snapshot and the list we have today is miles beyond what Jonathan Gold started, if that makes sense.
I don't think I agree with you here. I mean, like, I don't think I think this is like you need some coffee or something because they're building on the foundation that J. Gold did. I don't think I follow this thing. I mean, whenever you look at stuff in the past, it looks either obvious or old. That's the whole point. It's the past. But like Gold was the one who essentially broke out of the confines of fine dining, and then what the LA Times is and people across whatever the nation have done since then is followed through on that and build on that foundation is left. I don't think you can say at all like that. I don't track with this comparison necessarily.
I don't know. I just think like Bill Addison in the past couple of years has just gotten criticism that you're no Gold, you just haven't been as daring as him, or like you haven't done sort of the same work that he did, right? And I just think like,
do people actually say this, or is this in your head? Legit actual question,
dude.
Yeah.
No, I have absolutely heard this. I've heard this on other podcasts. I've seen this on Reddit boards. As I said, dude, I've been spending a lot of time with this. And I think that there's this perception that we've somehow like stepped backwards with Addison. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think actually, Jonathan Gold gets a lot of credit for sort of pioneering this, but I don't think that actually what he was doing was half as forward thinking as Addison. There, I said it.
Wow. Enjoy being on this island. I am sailing away.
All right, fair enough. Finally, my last take on this, and then we can move on to other topics, is I think they need a full team to do this. I think we're past the days of it being a job for a critic or two critics. I think that they could use an entire team to put together this list. Same way that, the Beard Awards, right? When they're judging the Southern California chef, it's not just one or two people doing it. It's an entire team of people doing it. I think that will lead to more deliberation. I think that it will lead to maybe more thorough analysis. And I just think that it might lead to maybe not a better end product, but a different end product that I think some people, especially the nerds like us, would appreciate more. And honestly, when we talked about like some of the lists that were compiled by I think it was Bon Appetit, right, on Best New Restaurants, their methodology, people like their team going all over the fucking country to find that thing, we were impressed by the breadth of that. And I think that the breadth of a search, the sort of depth that a list could go to with just two people doing it, is just inherently limited.
I hear what you're saying, but I would also say on this one, be careful what you wish for. I prefer it being an individual or two, because I think that makes it more likely that you'll see turnover is actually good on the list. You want that. You want new places to get the shine and recognition each year. And I think if you have a team deliberating, you might end up with a more static list. Look, there are decisions that an individual can make, or that the two folks like Bill and Jen can make here, that I think if you actually put it up to a group of 30 people or whatever, wouldn't be the same. Even stuff like Barbacoa Ramirez, right? Maybe everyone agrees it's a top 10, top 15 place. I kind of doubt it though. I feel like you'd see a much more typical fine dining gradient. That's what I would suspect could happen if you had a broader deliberation. More cooks in the kitchen, not always a good thing.
I could see it going both ways. Let's just say we'll never know, because I don't think they'll ever do it that way. All right, enough about the 101, arguably too much, but I love this shit, dude. I really, really love this shit. So thank you for coming along this absolutely insane journey with me. We're going to do a lightning round of Chef's Kiss Big Miss, and then I'm going to let you go, okay?
All right.
Eater released its annual awards, including Budonoki as Best New Restaurant, Jose Olmedo Carlos Rojas of Simone as Chef of the Year, Petit Grain as Best New Bakery, May Malai as Best Pop-Up Gone Permanent, and Baru as Comeback of the Year. So, is this roster of awards a Chef's Kiss or Big Miss?
I think this is great. I kind of wish Eater did more. I wish Eater did more than this, actually.
Oh.
Is what of course they have the 38 essential. That's basically the thing, and they have the hot new restaurants or whatever. So they do it. And I get why this is more like a championship belt more than a broader list. I think, to your very point, Eater is a team of folks who know the city back and forth. And I think it's interesting, as we discussed, that Budonoki is their top restaurant and omitted from the 101. Shout out to Simone, one of my favorite new spots that I tried this year.
And they were included on the 101.
Yeah. But also, but I was looking at Simone too. Simone, I think, is below Sonora Town on the list, right? I went to Sonora Town 3 times in a day recently. We did 3 escape rooms in downtown. We had Sonora Town after each room that we did. It was great. Very solid spot. There's just no way it should be ranked more highly than Simone. I just that's a thing that makes me wonder what the thinking criteria is. Sonora Town, both. Look, obviously a great spot. Not as buzzy and hot or interesting as Simone. Simone, by pursuing the menu it pursues, is doing something more ambitious. It didn't make sense to me. So anyway,
I'm gonna say this though: Sonora Town, wilting flower. I do think that they have deserved to be high up on the list. I actually disagree with you. I think that just because they have a more limited menu and stuff like that, their scope is smaller. Ultimately, I do think that they've really done something important for Northern Mexican cuisine in the city, but they're expanding. Tough to keep up with, right? They have 3 locations now, I think, in the works. They were at 11 in 2022, 12 in 2023, and they were 26 in 2024. I think they're going to continue to drop. I'm just saying that. Okay, enough of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
I'll let you have the last word on that one.
Well, no, because I realized I could go through the spreadsheet all day. So okay, moving on. Esquire released its list of best new restaurants 2024, and of the 35 included, 5 were in Los Angeles. Budonoki, as we mentioned, getting more praise. Azizam, which has gotten a lot of praise. Camellia, Meimalai, and Mori Nozomi. So 5 out of 35 of the best new restaurants in America being in LA. Is that number a chef's kiss or a big miss?
Doesn't sound like an ebb year to me.
Yeah, the question should be, was that Ebbier take from Bangers and Jams a big miss or a chef's kiss?
Yeah, I recently think it might have been. What I think is more true is that LA was really hot in the mid 2010s, and was like defined as this new, as a new culinary destination in the U.S. Now it kind of is established as that, and just like we were talking about with these restaurants, has become a less interesting city maybe to talk about or to define in that way, just because we're like, yeah, we get it. It's like when a person becomes famous or whatever, a new athlete becomes hot, they have their peak 2 years and then everyone turns on, right? Not saying that everyone's turning on LA, but I think what that conversation we talked about captured is actually that energy, maybe a little bit more so than the reality about the kinds of new restaurants that are opening.
By the way, though, Emily Wilson of The Angel is going to be on This Is Taste, the podcast with Matt Rodbard.
Oh, hell yeah.
I think that's going to be a great conversation. Very much looking forward to that one. All right, next one. The iconic Norms on La Cienega that is credited with being a pioneer of Googie architecture is being replaced by a Raising Cane's. Is this a chef's kiss or a big miss?
Yeah, sad to see. Norms is like Raising Cane's. We don't need that. I mean, yeah, I'm bummed about this. One of my favorite Norms memory, I remember a bunch of my college buddies and I were having a night out on campus. We drunkenly walked to Norms down the street from us, and my buddy Jace is looking at the menu so earnestly, and he looks up at the waiter. This is 2:30 a.m. or something, and he's like, "Is the seafood fresh caught?" And it's what? What are you talking about? He sounded so. Oh no, the shrimp. He's like, "Is the shrimp fresh caught?" And the guy's like, "What do you? What is this question that you're asking Norm's waiter at middle of the night?"
That sounds so Jace, just because I feel like he's always trying to connect with people, and I think that's what he was trying to do in that moment. All right, last one on the podcast. 2 Bears, 1 Cave. Matthew McConaughey of Hey 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 fame, of All Right fame, divulged his personal recipe for tuna salad, which goes as follows: mayo mixed with wasabi, chopped red onions, dill pickle gherkins, crispy jalapeno chips, corn, frozen peas, diced apples, and a touch of agave for sweetness. Saul, is Matthew McConaughey's tuna salad a chef's kiss or a big miss?
This is so obviously high food. He definitely just smoked with Woody Harrelson and just made this. This sounds truly. I would not eat this. I've seen people making it on YouTube or whatever, trying to recreate it. And some of them are actually surprisingly good. No.
For me, it's honestly one of those things where I'm so on board until we hit a certain point.
Yeah.
I'm really on board with mayo mixed with wasabi. Interesting. Chopped red onions, dill pickle gherkins, we're on board. Crispy jalapeno chips, okay. Don't hate that. Corn, I start to get suspicious. Frozen peas, I'm out. You've lost me. Why frozen? That just makes no sense.
I mean, at least maybe if they're frozen going in, it adds texture. But no. And he even says he says you should keep it in the fridge overnight, so they're gonna get mushy anyway. Nah, not peas. I don't want peas.
Yeah, uncooked pasta would add texture as well, but that would be gross. That's why we don't add it. Yeah, no, this is all around a big miss. But I gotta say, kudos Matthew for trying. All right, I have a shitty Yelp review of the week, and then I'll let you go.
Sounds good, buddy.
Do you recall last week when we discussed Jesse Palmer's guide to dating, and and we mentioned that I said it was a big miss because he included Pizzeria Bianco. You asked me why, and I told you it's because bringing a date near Chris Bianco is a huge rookie mistake when dating, because he just has an undeniable sex appeal, as was relayed to me by my wife when we went to Pizzeria Bianco. Clipped this bit, thought it was going to be fun for the podcast. My wife texted me yesterday and is like, "Why is my boss asking me if I'm sexually attracted to Chris Bianco. I mean, yeah, so it turns out her boss follows us on social media and heard this clip and was all of a sudden curious about, her affinity for older gentlemen making pizza. And that is it.
I mean, look, I got the same text from your wife being like, why am I being asked this question? And my response to her, did we lie? That's what I heard from you. And she was like, look, it's facts. What do you want?
Yeah. Somebody wrote in the comments of that post, Chris Bianco, more like Riz Bianco.
Yeah. I saw that.
It's good. It's good. Matt, I didn't think about it. You've been a good boy. You got a shitty Yelp review of the week?
I'm gonna save. I'd have to think about it. I'm doing a bad job with shitty Yelp review. I'm sure I have them, but I also got to get going, man. So we got to wrap this up.
I appreciate you. Thank you for this. Yeah. Thank you, Father Sal.
See you next time, man. I love that I don't let you say good job by you. You don't even know how to say bye to me anymore.
I literally was like, good. Thank you, Father Sal. All right. That's enough. Thanks for listening to another episode of the LA Food Podcast, dear listener, and thanks to Father Sal, as always, for making the time for us. One more thing I wanted to plug that I forgot to do on the podcast, but actually Alex Cantor of Cantor's Deli and the Hot Pastrami Pod, you can find him on Instagram at DeliBoySwag. He also released a list of the best restaurants this year. It's pretty damn good, so go give him a follow on Instagram and check that shit out. We will be back next week with another epic episode. Please consider leaving us a rating or review if you like what you heard today. And if you're looking for me before we drop our next episode, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, YouTube, and even our website at the LA Countdown. That's TheLaCountdown. You can also find us on Instagram at LA Food Pod. That's LAFOODPOD.